join an international public for whistleblowers whose purpose is to show that there were no Muslim hijackers at the control of the aircraft, but that the aircraft were electronically hijacked through employment of a system called uninterruptible autopilot that enables a remote source to take control of the aircraft's autopilot and flight management computers and fly the aircraft to its target. Now, once this system is engaged, the pilot can no longer disconnect. Now, we have a website at 911pilots.org and a YouTube channel at 911 Pilots. If you'd like additional information regarding this system or the flight resume of the alleged hijackers, just visit those sites for more information. For myself, I commenced flying over 50 years ago in 1968, and over the course of the next 35 years, flew a total of 15 different aircraft, accruing over 20,000 flight hours. I can unequivocally say without reservation or embarrassment that I could not have flown the flight profiles on 9/11, and neither could the hijackers. I have with me today Captain David Walden. He's in Texas. He's going to be the one interviewed today. Thank you, David, for joining us.
Thank you.
Could you start off by telling us what year you commenced flying and what type of aircraft you flew and the positions you flew in, your whole history of aviation here?
Yes, sir. I started flight training in 1969 in a Cessna 172. By April 1972, I had a commercial pilot certificate and flight instructor certificates in airplanes. I also flew air tankers dropping fire retardant on forest fires in Arizona in a Lockheed PB-2. On September 11, 2001, I was at work as a software test lead in quality assurance at Omega Corporation software development in Nacogdoches, Texas. I happened to have a copy of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2000 on my Windows machine at work. I also happened to have been a flight instructor for 23 years, a first officer, which is co-pilot, also known as second in command, line captain, which is pilot in command, director of training, check airman, that is, I gave the crew their check rides to remain legal, chief pilot and director of operations for a scheduled regional airline flying de Havilland DHC-6300-Twin Otter turboprops, Beechcraft C-99 turboprop airliner, and Piper PA-31T3 turboprop commuters, and then as a first officer with American Eagle Airlines out of DFW on a British Aerospace Jetstream 31 turboprop. Later, I served as a corporate pilot, a corporate Beechcraft C-90 turboprop King Air pilot holding an FAA airline transport pilot certificate in airplanes, single and multi-engine land with nearly 7,000 hours as pilot in command of airplanes. Now back to Nacogdoches, Texas on 9/11. If we were caught up on our work at Iomega, local management would allow us to play video games on Fridays. I shared Microsoft Combat Flight Simulator with the group since they were fans of World War II based ground combat video games. I was the only one who held a pilot certificate. They played it for a while but soon lost interest. At home, I would practice making instrument approaches. That means flying the simulator strictly by reference to the instruments on Microsoft Flight Simulator 2000 in a Learjet in weather at minimums. That means the worst possible legal weather you could land an airplane at the Nacogdoches airport. Then we watched the attacks on TV. So I immediately loaded up Microsoft Flight Simulator 2000 with a Boeing 767 at Boston's Logan Airport, took off and flew by hand and eye, paralleling the coastline at below 10,000 feet above sea level down the coast toward Manhattan. Once I identified the Twin Towers, I entered a shallow descent toward them at max power. Now, with all of my experience and ratings, I over-controlled the simulator so badly that by the time I got to the towers, I was in a PIO, a pilot-induced oscillation, rocking the wings back and forth all the way to wingtips vertical in left and right rolling swings. I couldn't stop it. I arrived at the Twin Towers with the wings vertical in a 90-degree bank and flew right between the towers, completely missing both of them. I could not do it. Sure, it was only Microsoft Flight Simulator 2000, not the real thing, but it was real enough to prove to me that I couldn't do it without a lot of practice and maybe never.
Thank you, David. Well, with those credentials, you certainly would qualify as an expert witness as a pilot. Would you be willing to testify under oath on
Abs-
camera before a federal grand jury or in a court of law, attesting
abs-
to what you just said?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's talk about the Pentagon profile. You talked about the Twin Towers and the impact there. The American Flight 77, flown allegedly by Saudi Arabian hijacker Hani Hanjour, a 29-year-old, approached the Pentagon from the west and at 7,000 feet commenced a descending, accelerating corkscrew turn to arrive at the surface at precisely ground level without striking the surface, hitting the Office of Naval Intelligence at over 5,000 feet, 5,000 knots. This maneuver was replicated in a simulator, and they brought a young pilot in with the equivalent resume as the hijackers had. And every time he attempted this replication of the maneuver, he crashed the simulator. Now, there were more experienced pilots, very experienced pilots, who also attempted to replicate this maneuver, and they also crashed the simulator. So, given your knowledge of Hani Hanjour's experience, given that he came to the States in the mid '90s and trained a little while, and went back to Saudi Arabia, and in January 2001 he returned to the States and tried to re-enroll in the school that he was flying out of before, and they would refuse to accept him because he was such a poor student when he was there before. In August 2001, a month prior to 9/11, he went to the Freeway Airport in Maryland and tried to rent a Cessna 172, and they refused to rent the aircraft to him because he could not handle or land a Cessna 172. Now, given that experience level or lack thereof, do you believe that he could have flown the flight profile? And if not, why not?
No, he could not have flown it because that airplane, that heavy jet, is nothing like a Cessna 172. As I demonstrated to myself, I couldn't, with all my ratings, I could not fly a Boeing 767 simulator. So it's ludicrous for anyone to believe that Hani Hanjour could have pulled off that maneuver. I certainly couldn't do it.
I couldn't either. Now, you flew the Cessna 172 and you've flown modern commercial jet aircraft. Could you describe the differences between flying a jet and flying a 172?
Well, there's really no comparison. The Cessna 172 is more like a Volkswagen Beetle compared to a Mack truck with regards to a wide body jet. There's just no comparison, especially given the instrumentation in the cockpits. You have to train for years to understand these complicated computerized flight management systems. It's nothing like stepping into a Volkswagen Beetle and driving off in it. You really have to know what you're doing.
Right. I've heard the analogy of the planes hitting the Twin Towers to that of what you were just saying, of never having driven a semi-tractor trailer, climbing inside, getting it up to over 500 miles an hour, and trying to drive it through a Jiffy Lube or a garage without scratching the surface with the aircraft. Would you agree that that's a pretty accurate assessment?
That is, I would agree, yes, it's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Well, 99% of the global population appears to have fallen for the story that these pilots flew those aircraft. Would you agree that the reason that they fell for the story was that they're not pilots themselves and they cannot conceive of the absurdity of this notion?
I would agree wholeheartedly.
Yes. Well, there's never been a criminal investigation into 9/11. People believe that the 9/11 Commission was, and it was not. And pilots are demanding their day in court, and we aim to get it through interviews like this and other actions we're taking with the U.S. government. Do you have any closing comments you'd like to make, David?
No, I would just like to possibly correct something you said earlier. You said that the airplanes approached the towers or the Pentagon at 5,000 knots. I think you meant 500 knots.
I did say that, yes. I stand corrected. Thank you. 500 knots. So if you're a pilot out there listening to this interview um, and you would like to be interviewed yourself, go to our website at 911pilots.org. At the top of the page, there's a Join Us tab. It's real easy to fill out. All we need is your name and email address and a box indicating, there's a box down there you indicate what type aircraft you've flown, the flight hours you have, etc. And we'll be getting in touch with you. Anyhow, thank you, David, for taking the time to be interviewed today.
My pleasure.
And until next time, this is Captain Dan Hanley and Captain Dave Walden signing off and saying so long.